about to hear a revolution in talk radio, Liberty Talk Radio, where the critical thinking will defrag your mind of propaganda-ridden viruses induced by mass media news programming. No BS here, just the facts.
And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly. Wow. In talk radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
Welcome, everyone, to Liberty Talk Radio, America's libertarian voice, broadcasting from our studio in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to around the world. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano, and this is your antidote to popular talk radio. Folks, it's time for us to take back control of our government, now before this bureaucratic, oversized, and self-serving federal government starves us of our property, our freedom, our rights, and our liberty. But to do this, we must shed conventional thinking regarding our political structure. We need to be revolutionaries in thought, dissidents in action. Only after we recognize what our government is doing to our freedom and our Constitution will we start taking it back. And this program is just about that. Folks, today we're honored to have as a returning guest economist from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Andy Sutton. Before I put him on, I want to make a comment. We're going to talk about the dysfunctionality of our government when it comes to inconsistent U.S. foreign policy. Quite frankly, I don't know why our government has to have a foreign policy. We should have a foreign. I should have a foreign policy. If I want to do business or have some sort of personal relations with someone around the globe, that's my business. It should be no one else's. Whether they live in Chile, Kazakhstan, China, it makes no difference. It should be my prerogative as a free person of this planet to do business with or be friends with or not be friends with anyone else on the planet. But we always look towards the government for everything that we do. We need a policy. We need a law. We need a rule. We need parameters. We can't afford just to talk to anyone, God forbid. But the government can make all sorts of legislation that restricts our freedom, and at the same time, somehow, someone in Washington is making a heck of a lot of money on it while we pay for it. And we literally pay. We literally pay for our freedoms to be reduced and diminished. And then we thank these crooks in Washington, these slime balls in Washington, and then we do is we go to the polls and we elect them all over again. It's beyond me. Now that I ranted for a second, here we are. Our guest, Andy Sutton. Andy, welcome to Liberty Talk Radio. Sorry for the diatribe.
That's all right. You clearly don't need me tonight.
Well, tell me, what's wrong with, from your point of view, what's wrong with our dysfunctional, I guess, our U.S. foreign policy or inconsistent foreign policy?
There was actually a really good article today, and I'm not going to say what source it was on, but people can easily go and find it themselves. It seems anytime I mention certain key words, my website ceases to exist. So if you go to my website now, you're going to find the background image is the Constitution, and there's a couple Thomas Jefferson quotes about banks and money that people really ought to take to heart. And that's it. There's nothing else, because it's kind of hard to hack an image and some text, but I'm sure some of these bozos could figure it out. But yeah, there was a good article about comparing us once again to the Roman Empire and the parallels about losing power at the end, and I agree. And I think personally, my opinion is this whole thing revolves around the petrodollar. It's been under attack for 15, 20 years now, and the attacks are starting to cause damage. And that is why I think you're seeing all these lashing out at various countries. The countries that we lash out at and that we've been lashing out against have a couple of things in common. One of them is they choose or would like not to use dollars for foreign exchange. And the second thing is they don't have a Rothschild / IMF / World Bank controlled central bank. Those are the two things that they have, and when they show a resistance to going the United States' way, we bomb them, basically. That's our foreign policy right there in a nutshell. You either take this corrupt system or else you get bombs dropped on you. And this was one of the possibilities that was talked about in the late 80s and early 90s when Daddy Bush, not Shrub, Daddy Bush, I call the grandfather Tree, so it's Tree, Bush, Shrub. So that should help people understand, the hierarchy there. Anyway, all kidding aside, when George Bush, the daddy, mentioned the New World Order, or a New World Order, this is what he was talking about. America was going to be the global police, and we were going to have the biggest military, and we were just going to go around. Do you think that our government is doing the things it's doing? Do you think that the puke that's coming out of the mouth of Obama, of Bush, of Trump, do you think this has anything to do with people in this country? No. It has everything to do with other people's interests who are outside this country for the most part. International bankers, international corporations, people who think they're above the law. That's basically what this is all about. It's about catering to a bunch of names, honestly, that most people have never heard before in their lives. And they're the ones, everybody says, the United States is in debt, whatever it is now, 250 trillion, if you do it the right way. The world's in debt, oogla billions, whatever. Well, who's all that money owed to? Nobody bothers to ask that question. It's not China, because guess what? China's in debt too. So who exactly is all this money owed to? And this is the cabal or the cartel, whatever you want to call it, that is basically calling the shots. They're the ones, they're the creditors. The rest of us, we're debtors. We're debt serfs, debt slaves, neo-feudalism, whatever you want to call it. That's basically what's been set up around the globe now. You look at Europe, you look at North America, you've got this very feudalist type where you've got lords, vassals, serfs, slaves, and most of it centers around debt. And who's in debt to who's not in debt to who, how much. And people it's not just here. I talk to people in England, I talk to people in Europe, I talk to people all the way down in Australia, and they all say the same thing. The average person in all of these countries, ours included, is dumber than a bucket of hammers when it comes to figuring this out. And I don't say that with impunity against anybody. Unless you really, really, really dig, you're not going to learn this stuff. You're not going to get this from media. You're not going to get this from CNBS. You're not going to get the, oh wait, I'm not allowed to say that, am I? BS? Well, that's what it is.
Absolution.
Bravo Sierra, how's that?
Yeah, Bravo bless you, my child. Go ahead.
But anyway, any of these so-called news networks, they're not news networks. It's basically marketing, psychology at play, at work here. They don't call it programming for nothing. And you give certain stimuli, you get a program response. It's like the dog, Pavlov's dog. You get it to obey a command, you hold a treat, the dog salivates. We do the same thing. We don't even realize it. So in that regard, we're basically the same as the dog. So now, how do you get out of this? First thing you can do is shut your darn TV off. That's the first thing you can do. The second thing you can do is stop paying your cable bill, unless you just need it for internet. Third thing you can do is cut off your subscription to the newspaper. The fourth thing you can do is cut off your XM radio. They have news. Get rid of that. Get rid of all this stuff. Break out your old brain. Put the running shoes on your old brain and go run a marathon with your brain and apply a little common sense to this and realize that, hey, nobody does anything for free. And if these guys weren't getting insanely rich with these ridiculous foreign policies, they wouldn't be doing it. Yeah. So that's really why we have a foreign policy. And you remember how the media just absolutely trashed Ron Paul when he talked about isolationism and protectionism. They didn't want to hear that. We can't do that. We have to be concerned because there's a real threat. Yeah, there is. It's called you're losing your power and you don't like it.
Right.
Right. Get put on your big boy shorts. They're britches. It's coming. These umpires only last a certain amount of time. This one here has gone on 250 years runabouts. It's almost done. It's almost over. Chinese, they've been going for much, much longer, 4,000 years, something like that. So we're very short-lived in terms of empires. Our cycle has happened very quickly. But here's the thing. Empires never die easy, especially now. We're going to die. We're going to go down swinging. Not us per se, but the empire, the interventionism, all that is going to go down swinging, and that's what's happening right now. You're seeing they're going to pick a fight everywhere they can. They're going to pick a fight with Russia, Iran, Syria, Turkey. Who else? China. Tariffs. They're going to lay it all out there. Nuke deals, non-nuke deals. Well, screw the North Koreans. We're not going to meet with them this month. They're going to do everything that they can to antagonize. And I'm going to tell the stupid people on the right something. That puppet that's in there that's saying all the cool things that you think are tough, that's a puppet. That's it. With a big mouth.
Yeah.
So people can come and hack my website some more. Just like to be fair, just like the guy who before him was another puppet, also with a big mouth.
Yeah.
And these guys make perfect lightning rods. Did you hear what that SOB said? This is what you get on the street. I can't believe it. And everybody spends their time paying attention to a puppet and not paying attention to what's happening or what's actually going on. So that's kind of my rant, at least on foreign policy. But at least the foreign policy, as wrong as it is, as twisted as it is, it makes a certain amount of sense.
Yes.
Why things are being done the way they are. They're defending their oil petrodollar standard. They don't have a gold standard anymore. So they're going to protect the petrodollar. See, that's the thing. The gold standard was more for the people. The petrodollar standard is more for the banks and the corporations. And they don't care about us. If we have a strong currency to be able to trade with, they don't care if we get made poor by the decade, by the century. That doesn't matter to them. What matters is their power. And that's what the petrodollar is. That's their power. For anybody who's not familiar with the term, it's basically the idea that oil for dollars. Oil gets pumped out of the ground. The transactions are carried out using U.S. dollars. What that does is it creates demand for U.S. dollars because anybody who wants to buy oil has to have a bunch of dollars hanging around. If all the transactions are denominated in dollars, you have to have some. So that causes demand, and guess what? They can create a lot of inflation, and we can export it, and that's what we've been doing. We've been exporting inflation. That's why you're not seeing the Venezuelan inflation here, because we're able to export it. But here's the thing. You see Russia cuts a deal with Iran. Iran cuts a deal with this country. China cuts a deal with Iran, Turkey, whatever. Qatar is in there. All these deals, and we're going to use the yuan. We're going to use gold. We're going to use euros. Iran is going to be selling oil for euros. And that was the same thing that their neighbor, Iraq, Saddam, decided that he wanted to try to do back in 2002, and they stretched his neck for it. And one of the first things that we did when we got into Iraq, it had nothing to do with liberating the people or making things better for the people of Iraq. The first thing we did was we reset the oil trades to take place in dollars. That was the first thing we did. So that tells you what was important to us, was getting that turned around, because that we can't have. Because if we're not using dollars to buy oil, there goes the demand for dollars. Who the heck wants them? What do you need them for? There's too many of them all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Now you got a problem. This is one of the reasons why the Fed said, starting at the beginning of the year, that they're going to actually tighten the money supply. And I don't know if you noticed this, but right about the same time as that happened, the 3 or 4 major websites where M3 was recreated, they all went off the air.
No, I didn't notice.
They all
that.
disappeared.
No, I didn't notice that.
Yeah. Now in Futures was probably the most popular one that people looked at, because they gave a number of different charts showing showing visually what was going on with all the monetary aggregates, and it's gone. It just disappeared. So yeah, there's something going on there. So are we looking at a 1932 style deflationary event? Normally, that'd be a good thing. Less of a dollar makes the dollars worth more. Here's the problem. What about all the debt? What's the debt denominated in? Dollars. What if there's not enough dollars to cover all this debt, which there won't be? Then what happens? Foreclosure, repossession. I'm telling you, I've been saying this for 10 years, 12 years, whatever. People still don't want to listen. Stay the hell out of debt.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to listen. Oh, I have to have this gizmo. I have to have this gadget. It's only $25 a month. You're a darn fool. You're a darn fool if you're having your stupid phone or your little touchpad, whatever. You know, it's just.
Oh, we lost your voice,
We
Andy.
lost your voice,
There you go.
Andy.
That's not a surprise.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Okay. There you go.
I'm not surprised
The
at
voice
all.
went blank for a second.
Voice went blank for a second.
So, yeah, that creates possibly some real problems, especially if you get a bunch of these people start working together and they drop the dollar all at the same time. Nobody has to sell a single treasury bond. That's the thing that people don't get. People always say, well, the Chinese, they could dump the treasuries. They don't have to. All you have to do is get a bunch of countries to say, you know what? We're not going to use the dollar anymore. We're going to use CalFlops because they're worth about the same thing. And that's it. It's over right there.
What happened to the Shanghai
Accord,
where they countries in the East are trading oil using the yuan as the yuan petrodollar, if you will, purportedly partially backed by gold. What's the status of that? Do you know? Have you heard anything?
It's ongoing. They're doing it. There's bourses or exchanges that are selling oil for units of currency other than the dollar right now. So this is why everybody is in such an uproar, and this is why you've seen this frenetic blitzkrieg of rash foreign policy going about. It's an intimidation attempt, basically. You know what? And the thing is, I think Russia's playing it smart. They're not engaging really so much in the war of words. They're just saying, oh, you know what? Go ahead, talk all you want. We're going to help. I told you. How many years ago did I tell you they're never going to leave Syria?
Right.
They're not going to let that one go.
That's right.
And they're not going to. And it's simple economics. Why? It's all about that pipeline. They are not going to let that go. They're going to, without going in and start, because they're not stupid. They know that when this system here gets desperate enough, we will launch a nuclear weapon on somebody. I have no doubt. If it gets that desperate, that we would do something like that. No doubt. You think that people crazy enough in our system to do that? Absolutely. Absolutely. So they're not going to do anything to provoke that. But they're going to help here and there, kind of on the sly, on the down low. They're going to influence situations, shoot down some tomahawks. Our news gets up there and says, "Oh, we launched 59 rockets into in Assyria, and here it turns out that it's very likely that at least 60% of them got shot down. Never made it to their targets. Who knows if that's true or not? I wasn't there, but it's food for thought. So a lot of these countries, go ahead.
It just seems that all of this starts from the very inception of schools in our school system. We're not taught to think. We're not taught reality, what really occurred. We're just taught to memorize information that the teacher gives us. Teachers typically are not scholars in themselves. They don't research what they have to know to become a teacher. They just memorize and then they regurgitate it to the kids, for the most part. Now, there are teachers that say, hey, there's something wrong with this egg, it's rotten, and but they probably would never become a teacher, or they would drop out. It just seems that I have conversations with teachers regarding history, and they don't like and I just ask questions. I say, I don't understand how this occurred or whatever. They literally get angry because it deviates from what they've memorized and what they've been teaching their kids. And I think it starts from a very, very early age. I remember when my cousin Susan, who passed away some years ago, she was a wonderful person. I remember she took a course entitled Home Economics. I thought that was such a big word when I was a little kid, But we were taught to be more independent. We were taught more to take care of ourselves, to think, and to be responsible citizens. But today we're just taught to memorize. And I'm convinced that our school system is simply an indoctrination system by the government, because it's all mostly hogwash. In fact, I just read an article the other day, and I forgot the gentleman's name, but he's a scholar at the Mason University. And he said that education today is absolutely worthless, right across the board. He said, just worthless, what we learn. He said, it's better off if the kids just learn to read, write, do basic math, put them out on their own. They'll learn the rest on their own, whether it be in a garage or in a trade school or in a school that teaches them something that they're interested in. And he said he wished they would do away with all schools. I thought it was a fascinating article.
The interesting thing about that is you take a bunch of 7th graders, and I've done this, they understand inflation if you show it to them. You don't tell them anything. You just demonstrate. And they explain exactly what it is to you.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And it's not just the school, it's the university system is even worse. Because supposedly in the university system you have scholars, and I can't tell you how many times, and I've told this story before, being in grad school and getting into a debate with a professor, and the last shot that they fire is, well, because I said so.
Yeah, right.
So that tells me one of two things. All right, you either don't know or you're wrong, and you really don't want to admit it. So, yeah, look, even the scholars got Keynesianism all wrong, right? These smart guys, what's his name? Krugman.
You're right.
Writes brilliant articles, right? All Keynesianism, it's all garbage. Because all the foundation is wrong. The foundation's rotten. So what's going to happen when you try and build something on top of it? It's going to collapse. That was the whole idea of Keynesianism. And even Keynes said this is a short-term fix, and it's not even really a fix; it's a band-aid. That was never meant to be a long-term policy. And what I'm talking about is this idea that when the economy dips into recession because we don't have a decent currency, we don't have a unit-backed currency that maintains its value. That's why you have swings in the economy. If you had a gold standard that nobody messed with, and the banks stayed out of it, and they didn't print certificates against the gold and then go and print too many and do all those kind of tricks, you'd have a fairly stable, there'd be ebbs and flows. But now it's like this.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's all this interference that's taking place.
Yeah.
So even university scholars, You pick up The Economist, you pick up any of these publications, and these articles, I saw real great, and they got these complex math formulas and all this other stuff. But guess what? Garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. And when you talk about, starting, with young people, you feed them a false premise and they'll build their entire life on it. And that's exactly what's happened. We've built an entire generation on the false premise that it's good to be in debt, right? You have to go to college, because if you don't, you'll never make any money. Well, golly gee, I just talked to a fellow the other day who's a welder, and he makes almost 6 figures welding. He never set foot in a college classroom.
Right.
There's a lot of really good jobs you don't need to go to college for. But this is a cash register. The government guarantees the loans, right? So the college costs go up 7-8% a year. Does that sound like the housing market with Fannie Mae guaranteeing mortgages? I mean, it's the same thing. It's the exact same market. And the thing is, people are taught from the very beginning the false premise that this is okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to do this because you're getting something now, whether it's a course, an education, a car, a house, whatever. You're satisfying your want now, and don't worry about the future, because in the future, in the long run, we're all dead anyway.
Yeah.
That's basically that little nugget that is the foundation of our economic thinking, and it's false.
Whenever
So
they come
if
up
we
with
change
some
that-
sort of,
whenever they come up with some sort of,
whenever they come up with some sort of
whenever they
foreign
come up with
policy
some sort of
statement,
foreign policy,
no one ever asked the question, whether it be on TV or in conversation or whatever, say, does the president have the authority to do that? Does Congress have the authority to do that? Does that violate my rights under the Constitution?
My rights under the Constitution?
Never mentioned anything. It's only, well, this person's authority, we listen to what he has to say. We can't do that. They must know more than I do. So they said they're the bad guys, so they're bad and we're good. And its conversation is ended. And if you ever bring it up, you're anti-American.
You're anti-American.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Have you noticed in the last decade how you hear less and less about what Congress is doing, and it's always insert president's name here, said, did, enacted, issued, whatever, decreed, that, whatever. I'm telling you, we are being groomed for a dictator. And people can get mad, and they can call up, and they can cuss me out. I don't care. Because it's all right there. The writing's on the wall. We are being groomed for that. Just the same way as we were groomed to accept ever-increasing levels of debt. We are being groomed to accept ever-increasing levels of government interference and quasi-dictatorial moves. And nobody dares ask the question. Even the left, they don't say, well, that's not the president's authority. They're worried about some stupid, cheap show with some hacker worried about an election. That's what they're all focused on. So if they were really, looking out for America, and if they were statespeople, they would be asking these questions and saying, there's one person should not be making these decisions. One person, whoever it is, I don't care if they're purple, should not be making the decision, well, the United States is going to pull out of a treaty, or the United States is going to violate its word on this treaty. That's Congress's job.
Right.
I mean, really, and the sad thing is, other than you, I don't hear a lot of Jeffersonian liberals or libertarians, as we would call them, similarly, whatever, people have similar beliefs today. We don't hear too many people asking that question. Hey, who gave one person the authority to take us to war?
Yeah, right.
Oh, well, they have 60 days. We've been at war in Iraq, Afghanistan for,
17 years, I think.
17 years.
I think.
Yes, 17 years.
Yes.
And did Congress ever pass a declaration? Not that I know of.
Nope. Never have.
I mean, how and that was 3 monkey suits ago.
Yeah.
How does that happen?
Well, Andy, if we don't fight them there, we'll have to fight them here. What's wrong with you?
I'd rather fight them here.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but again, it comes down to this false little premise, and then you build this ever-increasing structure upon it, and it's all you have to do is go, and it falls over because there's nothing under it. There's nothing supporting it. And if people take 5 minutes and think about what you and I have been talking about for the last half hour, they'd figure it out, and they could be free. There's nothing special. You and I hate to say it, we're nothing special. Nothing special. Everybody that's listening to this show has the same capability as we do. How we got there, different paths. You came from a generation that respected different things than we respect now. You came from a generation that respected the Constitution, the rule of law, the role of government, things like that. Now we have a generation, they don't respect themselves, they don't respect each other. People shoot each other over a bottle of soda or a phone. So what do we expect when it comes to critical thinking about foreign policy? You're not going to get any. You and I might as well go down to, wherever and talk to the wall. We'd probably get further. That's unfortunately the state that we're in. And people say, well, who cares? How does that have to deal with me? What does that have to do with me? Why do I need to worry about that? Well, that's the thing. Yeah. Once you know knowledge, that creates a responsibility. And people don't want that. Yeah. Everything's everybody else's fault. Nothing is my fault. Everything, it's always that guy. My parents did this. My whatever. The teacher sucked. The principal was a jerk. The professor was, racist. Whatever. I mean, you hear this all the time, right? Nobody's responsible.
Absolutely.
So why should I be responsible for my own understanding of the world that I live in? Why should I be responsible for my own finances? Well, I can just do whatever I want and then declare bankruptcy and let somebody else eat it. Or I can be a person who's perfectly capable of working, but I will make a cogent choice to sit on my ass, pardon my French, and collect welfare and lie about it, like a lot of what's going on, and it's perfectly fine. Oh, I'll do that because that's what I want to do. There's no respect for any institution, law, government, proper government, none of it.
Well, Andy, do you think that our monetary policy is going to dictate our foreign policy decisions? For example, if the U.S. dollar, all the people that I read, I mean, other than watching television, all the scholars say, this is what we're doing is unsustainable, as you have said. Eventually the dollar is going to reach its demise, and we may say within 2 years we may have a big disruption of the dollar. That's going to adversely affect or change or modify all of our thinking regarding foreign policy, and some of those decisions are going to be probably very wicked. What do you suspect is going to happen if and when the dollar loses its value and people start not wanting to renew the debt, roll over the debt? Obviously, they gave us their currency for our currency. We've spent their currency. We don't have it now. So they're going to say, hey, here's the $3 billion I'm cashing out. We have nothing to give them. What do? Give them oil? I mean, and then how does that affect our all foreign policy in that respect?
Well, they're kind of driving each other right now. Foreign policy and not so much foreign policy, but foreign goings on, if you will, has started to drive monetary policy back here because, like I said earlier, adjustments have to be made. If entities abandon use of the dollar for international transactions, whether it's in oil or other stuff. I mean, oil is the big thing. That was from the agreement with Saudi Arabia back in the early 70s. You buy debt from us. We'll pay you with these pieces of paper, and we'll give you basically exclusive pricing in the oil markets. That was the agreement that led to what's now called the petrodollar. So that agreement's been in place obviously a number of years, and people are getting tired of it because they know. You look at the dollar from when the Fed took over in 1913, it's lost 97% of its purchasing power. So it's not when the dollar falls, it's how much more is it going to fall.
How come we haven't found? How come we haven't felt a repercussion after the Shanghai Accord was reached with all the Eastern countries? China, India, Mongolia, Russia. And some all the stands, including Pakistan, they're trading petroleum with yuan. How come that we haven't seen a big disruption in the U.S. dollar or some sort of big shakeup and panic in the monetary system?
You're seeing it on the foreign policy side. You're not seeing it on the monetary side. What's happening on the monetary side is a scale. All right, as countries drop the dollar, the Fed comes in, they say, all right, well, we're going to tighten by 600 billion. And that kind of helps to even things out. So they're trying to, it's like the juggling act. There's a treasury bubble. They've got another housing bubble blowing up. The stock market's clearly a bubble. What else? Just a student loan bubble, just a general, the world is awash in debt. Right. So there's a gigantic debt bubble. Not all of it's in dollars, but a lot of it's payable in dollars. So why we haven't seen a shock is because the action overseas hasn't been big enough to overwhelm basically the retaliatory strike that's taken place by the Fed to trim the excess money out of the system and keep that supply and demand kind of balanced. Like I said, you get a whole bunch of countries to go away from oil and say, well, hey, this is working great with oil. We're going to do it for everything. And we're all going to do it at once. Now, that would be a shock. Yeah. But see, the thing is, when this started, this is why you're seeing this foreign policy frenzy. We're attacking Korea. We're attacking every country that ends in stan. We're attacking Turkey. We're after Russia. We're after Syria. We're after everybody. Why? Because this whole thing is starting to shake. We've been kind of slow burning for a while now, but these little agreements keep chopping away at what little is left of the foundation. I don't know if it comes crashing down or if they slow burn it down all the way. It doesn't matter. We're going to end up in the same place regardless. Dollar's going to lose its spot. Maybe the yuan takes its place. Maybe it's the BRICS basket backed by gold partially. Maybe it's something along the lines of an SDR. But we're not going to have that exclusive privilege of exporting inflation anymore. And that is going to cause dramatic changes in the way we do business and conduct our personal business in this country. That will bring about, it'd be like an ice age, really. That's how, tremendous something like that would be.
Yeah.
It's happening slowly right now.
Would you know what do we give countries that are holding our debt that decide when it matures and they don't agree to roll it over and they want out? They want to cash out their $400 million or whatever it is of debt that they have in the United States. They want to cash out. What do we give them? We can't give them dollars because it's just more debt.
It's more debt.
Well, that's the thing, and that's the problem. Right now, we're giving them a threat, basically. We are sinking down a little bit here as an empire, but basically the rhetoric is, hey, we can still do a lot of damage to you if we decide to do this or some other thing, like tariffs. I mean, that was just an obvious shot at China, that's a congressional issue, not a presidential one.
Yeah.
Again, nobody asked the question, who gives the president the authority to do this? Just unilaterally like that. Other countries aren't even asking that question. You don't see media outlets all around the world saying, who died and made these people king? I mean, that really, what's this, where are we going here? So this, like I said, it's going to be very interesting to see how good our central bank and not only the central bank, but also the big money center banks, how good they are at kind of deflecting the effects of these little agreements that are taking place around the world. And here, I'll give you something, food for thought. Rex Tillerson was Secretary of State, former CEO at ExxonMobil, right?
Right.
It'd be a really bad thing to have a CEO of an oil company as your Secretary of State when gas prices are rising like crazy, wouldn't it? We got to get rid of him. So who knows what's going on in advance and who doesn't? I mean, think about it. Think about it. That's not going to be good press to have a situation like that going on. And it seems like the more people we swap out, the more harsh. You got this Pompeo. He's running his mouth. The way he's talking. You'd think he was a prize fighter going up against like a string bean 155-year-old high school kid, or some crazy thing like some little skinny twerp. I mean, it's not a Cold War. It's a hot one. Yeah. The only thing it hasn't gone hot with is regards to weapons yet. But I tell you, we're firing missiles into Syria. Israel is firing missiles, doing things in Syria, and the Russians are doing things to protect their interests in Syria. We're really at war with the Russians. Nobody wants to say that,
right?
Because that would really upset things.
Yeah,
you couldn't have a 26,000 point Dow while we're involved in World War III with the Russians.
Right. Well,
but I think the Russians are playing this a lot better than we are.
Well, why do you think the market is held up so well? And it seems that people are accepting this antagonistic foreign policy that we have. Everyone seems to be our enemy. Everyone has to follow what we say. You don't hear people say, "Well, geez, President Trump is a strong president. He'll make America great again." And he just seems to degrading America to. It's like the bully on the block, the one that no one likes, and they just wish someone else would punch his lights out or he'd move out of the neighborhood. And I just don't get it. I almost feel like I'm a one-person, antagonist in this whole situation, and I don't understand it. I don't understand. I don't understand where we're going. And I don't know what. I don't know what money crashes.
Well, here's the thing: you have to have the figurehead that's appropriate for the times that the country's going through. Yeah. The figurehead we used previously was very abrasive, but didn't have the ability to instantly generate controversy.
Yeah.
That's what we need now, is somebody who can cause an instant diversion away from these, whether it's these deals to undermine the dollar, or bad foreign policy, lashing out at even more countries. Basically, now we're alienating the Europeans and the British, and they've always been among our strongest allies, and we're alienating them now by pulling out of the Iran deal, that nuke deal. That was a terrible decision if you're thinking about diplomacy and good foreign relations. I mean, that was probably the worst decision that could have possibly been made. But when you think about what is going on behind the scenes and the times that we're in, that was the only way it was going to go, really. Yeah. So look for more friends to become alienated. Look for more of these impulsive policies. You guys have a problem over there?
Oh no.
I thought you lost me again.
Don't touch it. Okay, I'm sorry. We're a little technical bug. We're okay. Andy, we have about 2 seconds to go. So we're basically out of time. I want to thank you so much for being on our show, and I hope you will accept our invitation to return in the near future for an update. I'm sure we're going to have a lot to talk about because a lot of things are going to happen, and I'd love your input on it.
All right, appreciate it. I'll be back. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much.
All right, bye-bye now, Danny.
All right, bye-bye now, Danny.
Folks, this is the end of today's broadcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support, and we'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends and let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. Remember, as my wife would say, you're either allowing your liberties to be taken away or you're striving to protect them. Unfortunately, folks, there is no middle ground. Until next time, this is Joe Cristiano. You've been listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Stay well. Stay tuned.